Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. Gonna get started here in a minute. Excited about this live stream. All right, so the topic of discussion today is going to be selling strategies. So I'm going to be talking about some approaches I take and how to capture profits, selling into strength, selling on weakness. So a couple of different ways to do it. So I'm going to be monitoring the questions on both the website, nodeinvestor.com, on the events page, as well as on YouTube. So here's the plan. We'll see if I can stick to this, but I'll try to get through this portion in about 20 minutes, maybe sooner. So if you do have questions, try to keep the questions to the sell strategies portion at first. I'll try to get through those. And then after that, kind of just open it up to you guys. And if there's a chart you want to look at, or if there's anything more specific you want to cover, we can get into that. So first off, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. You have all purchased my course, which is why you got this email. And I just really appreciate you guys' support. And I know a lot of you are learning from it already, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. So thank you guys. I'm enjoying this. And I got to say, man, this is what a raging bull feels like. I mean, the markets are just amazing right now. So I'm already seeing a lot of comments on Neo. What a day Neo has had. What a week, right? After that August 1st fork. So anyway, we'll come back to Neo. So let's go ahead and get to some of this topic here. So selling strategies. So I wanted to put this in presentation mode, but I'm kind of having some challenges with, so you'll see all the bullets at once here, but let's get to it here. So selling strategies. So first, some ground rules, right? You have to consider your time frame. So are you a long-term holder? Are you a day trader? Are you a swing trader? Because it will affect which strategy you use and when and how you approach some of this. So different strategies apply to different investment goals and styles. Another thing you want to remember is never let your losers run. And by that, I mean, if you buy something and let's say your intention was, hey, it broke out, or I think this is a good low point to buy it, and then it just starts to move against you, that's okay, right? You got to give them some leeway. But if you're down 20, 30, 40, 50%, at some point, you got to cut your losses. And this is all about capital preservation. And I know there's a lot of people that say you never actually lose until you sell. And that may be true. But in the cryptocurrency space, you don't have any guarantees that they come back. I mean, this is a very young market, and some of these will survive, and many of these will stay at these very low prices and just sit there forever, right? So try not to ever let yourself get in a position where you're down 40, 50, 60, 70%. You know, and if you can avoid those big losses in the long run, you'll do good. The other thing is have a plan to sell when you're wrong, not if, when, because all of us will be wrong from time to time. You know, sometimes the breakouts fail. Sometimes the market just gets crazy, and maybe you picked the right one, but the broader market is taking a hit. Bitcoin does something. There's news, an exchange gets hacked. You just never know. So have a plan to sell. What's the tolerance you're willing to take? What percent are you willing to lose on a trade? And so just think about that. And, you know, those tolerances, again, they vary depending on your style. If you're day trading, you're probably going to keep a tight leash on things. If you're a little bit more longer term holder, you can give it more leeway, right? You don't need to get shaken out on every little wiggle. And so just keep those in mind. Forget your ego, swallow your pride, and don't get emotionally attached. I mean, at the end of the day, I believe most of you are following me and reading this and learning this because you are in this to make a trading or an investment profit, and you're trying to maximize your gains. If you're in this for philosophical reasons, okay, that's a different story. But me personally, you know, just you try to keep the emotions out of it. And that's easier said than done. I mean, you're talking about investments and capital and money, and I get it, right? It's easy to get emotional. But what I'm saying is don't marry a token, right? Don't say, oh, I love this XYZ token and I'm never going to sell it and I'm holding it forever, right? Hodl, 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 as some recent pump and numbers would say. So just don't get emotionally attached. If you're wrong and move on, right? And if you are wrong, don't beat yourself up over it. I mean, we all make mistakes and we all take some losses from time to time. So just keep learning. And so here's some general rules that I like to use in weak markets like we had during June and most of July. Sell sooner, meaning keep your losses smaller. And if you do get a bump on profits, take them a little bit shorter. On strong markets like we have right now, these nice big bulls, hold longer, because generally when you're in a strong bull market, the surprises are to the upside and you can go much further than you think they can. And when you think something's expensive, it can just keep going and base out. So you just got to be aware of what environment you're in and adjust your rules accordingly. And so that can be summarized by saying take your losses quick and your profits slow. And that probably applies to everything, because generally investors will hold on to something that's in the negative for longer than they probably should, and they will dump something that's working well sooner than they usually should. And that's just human nature. All right, so moving on. So the first strategy is selling into strength. And so a couple of things to look at is selling before it reaches its peak, right? So let's say you're holding a position and you've been riding this wave up and you're up 30, 40, 60, 70, and these days 100, 200% up. Then you can start looking for signals to sell. So when you see this big green candle after an extended run, doesn't necessarily mean sell, but that's kind of maybe putting you on alert, because nothing goes straight up and straight down. So there's going to be ebb and flow. And if you're thinking, hey, we've had a good run, and you know, after it's already up 90%, you see that huge pop and it just goes up another 40%. You know, it's not a bad idea to take some profit off the table at that point, because generally what happens is it either pauses for a little bit, sets up a new base, or it starts to pull back and find some support. So it just depends. If you're day trading, you know, you'll get out. If you're a longer term holder, so like in the case of the last run when I was holding Ethereum, I had a core position that I would maintain. And when it would have those little mini climactic runs, I'd sell maybe a third of it or half of it, move that into something else that was working, and then keep that core position just in case it decided to keep running on me. So that's a way to do it. And we'll look at some chart examples. Another one is an upper channel break, and it's real similar. And what the upper channel break is, when something's kind of just moving up nicely, steady for a couple of days or weeks, depending on the chart you're looking at, and all of a sudden it has this huge pop to the upside and it breaks beyond the channel. A lot of times that's a little bit of an exhaustion buying. And so that's another signal. Obviously a climactic run, you know, when you see something just go parabolic and it just goes up huge, hundreds of percents, at that point, you never know when the top is on a climactic run. So what I do, if you can use it, not every exchange offers it, but if you can use it, use trailing stops, right? So maybe you set your stop at 5 or 6 or whatever percent below the current level. And that's a good way to do it, because then you kind of catch that move, and when it finally decides to just correct to the other side, it's usually pretty sharp and fast. And if you have a stop in place, you can generally get out at an optimal time, right? Because nobody really knows when the top is going to happen. And some other things we'll look at is RSI. So if you see some extreme highs, not necessarily a sell signal on its own, and I'll show you some examples why, but that's another warning flag, right? It kind of had a good move, and maybe it's time to start tightening up the stops. And so indicators like RSI and some of those other ones, they work better on longer time frames, so 4-hour or a daily, right? Because on the 1-hour chart or a 30-minute chart, I mean, they're going to go from one extreme to the other pretty frequently. But if you kind of zoom out a little bit and look at a 4-hour or a daily chart, you can see the broader perspective. Is it truly overbought or extended in the longer term time frame? Because if it's not, you might have a short-term pullback. It doesn't mean to get out, because on the daily chart, it's just a little tiny wiggle, maybe a pullback to the 10 period. So let's look at some examples of selling into strength here. So I'm going to go to the charts here. Oh, let's look at NEO, right? So everyone's talking NEO right now. So let's take a look at this one, right? So I'm going to zoom out. So this is a 4-hour chart, and let me go to the dailies first. And so you can see here back in early June, we had that initial climactic run, right? And so that's a climax run right there. When you see these massive moves, let me see what that percent gain was. I mean, it had already gone up a pretty good amount. So if we go from May to early June, at this point, you were already up 336%. So this little move was 336%. And over the next 4 days, it just had a massive run, and took it basically up 3,000%. So that's a climactic run. When you see that last bit that just goes up, and I mean that last bit took you up another 675%. You never know how high it's going to go, so you just kind of try to trail it. But that's an example of selling into strength. At that point, if you're holding it, you don't necessarily need to wait for it to crack, because when they do, they tend to fall down pretty good. But maybe you start taking some along the way, or put a trailing stop. Volume typically comes in at the very end like that. So you can see this massive volume spike. And look at the RSI. At this point, the RSI was 95 plus. That's outrageously in the overbought extreme area. So that's an example of selling into strength. Again, if you're a longer term holder and you're willing to kind of wait for it to settle out, then that's okay too. But you got to have a point where you're saying, if this doesn't work and it keeps going down, what's that low point, right? And I'd rather just avoid all that and just try to find another spot to get in, or keep a core position and then add the rest in at some of these low points. So if we look at what's happening here in the last couple of days, you're seeing something similar, right? You're seeing this big run, and we had the big run after August 1st, and we're basically up, almost 300%. It basically hit 300% earlier today. It was up basically at $40. So amazing run for NEO. If you've been on this, awesome. I mean, it just depends on where you got on. I can't tell you to sell necessarily, but I took some profits today on NEO. Now, NEO is my #1 choice right now, and it's my biggest position. But I took some profits just because I've been in this thing, kind of back in here, started accumulating some. Longer term, I think this has got a lot more to go. Near term, I mean, we're overextended. Look at how far we are from the 10 EMA. I mean, just from the shorter term moving average, NEO is, now with the pullback, we're still 38, 39% above. But earlier, we were 70% above the short term moving average. So inevitably, there's going to be either a pause where it starts to base out here, or it's going to be a little bit of a pullback. And so if we zoom in a little bit, you can see it pulling in here pretty good right now. And so that's where you start selling into strength, right? And I'll admit, I started selling in like right here and then right here, and I was watching it going up, going, oh boy, maybe I sold a little too early. I still have some in, but then, it just takes a lot of discipline to say, give it an hour or give it a day to see if it turns around. And it looks like it's pulling in a little bit here. So those are some of the moves, and you can see here on the 4-hour, I mean, RSI was at an extreme, almost at 90 right there. We're at 88. So selling into strength is kind of just waiting before this happens, before the sell signal starts showing up. And it's not always easy to do, because you're enjoying the ride. Like, for example, this one could have tricked you, right? It popped, had this little move. You could have thought that was it. Pulls back, holds this moving average, and just has another run, right? Maybe we see that happen again. So it's just hard to tell. So if you're wrong, just, get back in. So that's a climax run. Let's look for an upper channel break. I'm trying to see if I can find a good example, but let me see here. Let's go to Iota. So Iota's been kind of channeling right now. Maybe. So you generally like to see pretty steady climb and over an extended period of time, and then you see kind of the big poke out at the top of the channel. When you see a trend line at the bottom and a trend line at the top, that's a pretty decent channel there. So when you see those, especially if they're longer channels, if something's been moving up for a couple of weeks and then it just has that big pop at the end, that's usually an exhaustion type of buying activity, assuming there's no news or some crazy thing that is driving the selling, the buying. Again, we already talked very extended over 10 EMA, and we talked extreme highs on the RSI. So that's one strategy, selling into strength. The other one is responding to sell signals. So for example, heavy volume reversals. And so even if you don't sell, because a lot of times they just pull back and then they find major support at a moving average, but even if you don't sell, at minimum, it should put you on alert. And so a heavy volume reversal is, it's kind of going up, and then it has this big down candle on huge down volume. That's somebody taking profit. Or when you see these big wicks at the top of a candle, especially with huge volume, again, that's selling typically when it has a big reversal like that. What's a good example of that is what happened with Stratus today. So let's go look at that one. So when you see these big wicks, right, it tried to pop out and looked like it was a massive breakout and then just totally gave it up. It's kind of hard to see on the screen here, but there's a big candle. Let me switch over to the bar charts real quick just to show you guys. So you can see how high it went and how far back it closed. And that's selling, right? So somebody was selling into all of this, and it's huge volume. So even though the candle is green, it's a big reversal, and you're seeing it kind of pull back in a little bit. So it looked like a good breakout, and it's failing a little bit. So let's see if it reverses here. But if you see these type of bars at the top of a move after something's run up and has a big move at the top, this is probably not a good example, but let's say you saw this on NEO today and this big reversal. That's a big reversal selling bar. So that's another signal where maybe you're thinking the move is exhausted for now, and it's either going to base out or it's going to start pulling in. So even if you don't sell, you should be on alert, maybe tighten up your stops. Failed breakout. So if you see a cup and handle or a nice ascending triangle and then it pops out and then it just fails a couple days later or a couple hours later, then usually that's not a good signal. So maybe get out of the way at that point. And so what I would do is a breakout fails when it goes below the breakout point and not necessarily when it pulls back, because very often when something breaks out, it pulls right back to that breakout point and then keeps going up. So you don't necessarily need to sell at that point, but if it keeps going below the breakout zone that you were watching, it just depends on how much you want to give it. Give it a few percent, because nothing's ever exact, but don't let it get too far below that, because then that may be a failed breakout. Another reason to sell would be if you're seeing support levels getting taken out. And so there's a couple of ways to look at support. There's trendline support, and then there's horizontal, which is maybe prior resistance points, and moving averages. So let's go take a look at NEO again. We're gonna over talk NEO tonight. So if we zoom out here, actually, you know what? Let's go back to Stratus. Zoom out on Stratus. So let's say you're writing this one up, and it's starting to form this little bit of a trend here down below. That would be another way to look at a sell signal. So if you're holding it, it's bouncing and it pulls back and it finds support, it goes up and it pulls back, finds support, and once it breaches that line, that's a trend support that's now been broken. So you should be on alert at least at that point. And if this line were a moving average instead and it broke it, that'd be another sell signal. So you can see that happened back here, right? So Stratus was moving up, would bounce off the shorter term, moving up, bouncing up, and just kind of rode this 10 EMA on the dailies all the way up, and then it cracked right here, right? So your first signal was this big reversal right here, this big candle with the wick on there, and it started to go down, and you don't necessarily need to sell, but here you're watching it closely to see if it breaks, and then it did, found support, pops back up, but now it's kind of just, the trend has changed, right? So at that point, it's pretty good confirmation that the trend has changed. So that's a sell signal that you were going to want to pay attention to. Again, moving averages. So if it breaks key moving averages, my favorites right now are the 10 EMA, the 30 EMA, and then the 50 standard moving average. And just depends on the time frame, but they seem to work pretty good right now. And then a trend reversal, right? We saw that in June when everything just started to roll over, and we weren't really sure if it was rolling over, but more and more things started to point in that direction, right? Ethereum peaked, and then some of the other leaders peaked, and then Bitcoin peaked. So when you see a big trend reversal, it's usually good to just get out of the way, because you don't know how far they're going to go or start to lighten up. If you're familiar with the patterns already, right? Double top or a head and shoulders, when you start seeing that at the top of a move, that should put you on high alert. If you see a big double top or a big head and shoulders pattern, you should be looking for those necklines or the support levels to figure out, hey, where am I going to get out if this thing breaks? And then the last way here, and I'm almost done, is systematic selling. And so that is when you just take routine profits, and this is more for like day trading, but you can do it if you're investing too. I mean, this market certainly lends itself to that. But you sell at targets that are predetermined. And so specific targets that I like to use are a percent gain. So use like a risk reward ratio and say, hey, I'm willing to give this 10% to the downside and take 30% on the upside, or 20% and 5%, so some sort of ratio. And when you hit your number, either just sell at that point or set your stop pretty tight. And if you get stopped out, okay. And if it keeps going up, then good. So that's one way to do it. Another thing, again, cut your loss after a certain percent. And then take profit as it approaches prior resistance. And this one's important because this happens a lot. You see something rally right up to prior resistance, and that's generally where they pause. And so if you're in all-time highs, then this doesn't really apply. But if you're buying something that had a prior high, look back at those levels and see where they might be selling that. So let's take an example that I was using earlier, and that was EOS, right? So go to Bitfinex. I'm going to go to EOS on the dollar chart here. So if we go to the 4-hour chart, and so let's say you buy this one and you buy it here, let's say it breaks out, right? So one area to look at is, this is going to be a level that needs to be overcome. And if you zoom out a little bit, this prior high is going to be prior resistance here. And then these lows potentially, which now became support, could be resistance. So there's a couple of ways to look at that. So you can kind of count these as targets to the upside. And so if you bought here and you said, hey, I'm going to ride this until this first line, that's 15%. And if it breaks, I'm going to get this next one, that's 36%. And if it goes above, I'm going to get 50%, right? Then the next one would be up here. So you can kind of set your targets at those levels. This one probably wouldn't be very strong resistance, so I'd let it go above. This one might be more of a challenge, and then certainly these, and then all-time highs, right? So when you see these all-time highs, if something runs back up to the all-time high, at the very least, it's going to pause there a little bit, and it's going to kind of figure out what it's trying to do. It's going to be a little bit of a battle between the buyers and the sellers, and then it'll move. We saw that yesterday with NEO. NEO ran up to the old all-time highs on the BTC chart, and there was a lot of back and forth for a couple of hours, and then it just popped above and just kept going. So that's another way to do it, is look for those prior resistance points, and then take profits based on indicators. So again, I said, I'm going to sell when the RSI hits 80, or when the MACD, the moving average is reversed to the downside, or Fibonacci retracement gets hit. So this one's really good. I usually use this one a lot, is on the Fibonacci on the bounce. And so let's go back to NEO. This one worked out really nice on NEO when it came off that first high back here. And so let me zoom into this, and this is really where I made a little trade on this one. It wasn't really my core holdings, but let me find the fib here. So we had this big run up, right? And you can do a Fibonacci on the pullback. So if you pull it back to this level here, let me adjust this real quick. So go to the high, pull it back to the prior level. And so what you do is you want to do that from the high to the low. And this was a little trade setup right here. When it crossed above this shorter term average, I jumped on this, and my targets were the key Fibonacci ratios, right? So 0.382 and the 0.618. And let me move this over here so you guys can see a little bit better. And the 0.618 is just a key ratio, and that was my target. And this one worked out almost perfectly. So it ran up, and look at right where it started to peak out, right below that point. And then sure enough, it started to turn around, and that was it. My target was that Fibonacci ratio, and when it started to hit that, I lightened up on that position because I thought that was it. And sure enough, that was the bounce off the move, and just continued to consolidate after that for a little bit of time. So Fibonacci works really nice a lot of the times on those bounces, especially after a big sell-off like this. I mean, you can't run that Fibonacci on each of these little wiggles, but when you see a big move down and a big move up, it works pretty well there. So I believe that is it. So just to kind of recap, right, some of the strategies: sell into strength. You can respond to sell signals and sell after you see some weakening action in the charts. Or you can just make it systematic and say, I'm going to take X% and that's going to be it. So the way I approach it, the systematic selling is probably my least used version. I mean, I use this for swing trades and shorter term trades, but as you guys know, I like to catch some of the longer, bigger moves. And so what I'll typically do is I'll either sell into strength, or I'll just wait for the chart to start showing me some signals. I'll look for those big candle reversals. I'll look for trend lines being broken. So a lot of you guys will ask me, hey, what's your upside target and this and that? And sometimes I have one, but a lot of times I don't. I'm just going to let it run until the signals start to show up, because I want to catch as much of the move as possible, right? So I'm not going to necessarily jump out when it's up 20% or up 30%. In the stock market, that works very well because there's a ton of historical data that you can go back and show that, hey, after a 20 or 30% move, there's some profit taken and all that. But in this space, 20% is really not that much, so you kind of have to adjust accordingly. All right. I think that's going to be it. Any questions on the selling strategies and any of this before we start looking at some charts or answering other questions you guys might have? I'm going to scroll through some of the comments here. So let me see what we got going on. Neo. Okay. Quark. Let's see what else we got here. So what percent of the total should be sold in general in case it rallies again? So that's a good question. It depends on the token, right? So like in the case of like when I was riding the wave up on Ethereum last a couple months and now Neo, the project itself, the fundamentals, I have very strong support for, right? So I think they're going to keep going and they're going to be big ones. So I'll maintain a core position. So when I sell on those little moves up, it's typically maybe a quarter, a third. It depends on how big the move is, but I like to maintain a core position that I trade around. If it's something that I'm doing like a short-term swing trade or a day trade on, I'll typically say 100%. I'll just get out of the way. If I think my move is done or if my objective has been met, then I'll just get out of the way and take 100% profit. And sometimes they keep going, sometimes they don't. But if it was never really intended to be, my core holding or something I'm going to hold for more than a day or a couple days, I'll just take it all. And if it dips and starts to rally again, so what you want to look for, so that's a good question. So let's go to the charts. If you're wrong, right, and a lot of times you do sell early, get back in, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So let me zoom out here. So in the case of Neo, let's say you saw this little pop and you said, that's it, and you got out. Okay, so here's what you do here. Let me adjust this here. In the case of Neo, if you got out here and you saw it hit the moving average, maybe you can hold, but you notice it set up this short little resistance zone right there. So if it breaks above that, maybe you should start watching it again. And sure enough, if it breaks above the prior high, that's your signal. It's going to have another leg up, right? And it did. So you had this pop again. So if you sold here thinking that was going to correct all the way down and then you saw this big pop, hey, it's okay. Just get back in and see if it goes and just keep your stops pretty tight, right? So that's a way to do it. This material will be available. Yes, thank you for reminding me. So on this page, I will post a link and you can download those slides. I'll send a PDF link there. So thank you for reminding me on that. Let's see here. What else? Let me look at some of these questions coming in here. How do you determine upside target on a break of a new high? You don't. There's no telling. I mean, there's people that can do measured moves. You kind of measure the Fibonacci and you measure based on the size of the head and shoulders of the inverted. And, some of those have merit. Me personally, I don't. If something hits all-time highs, I like to say strength begets strength. And you just never know how high it's going to go. And most of the time, especially on a strong bull market, you'll be surprised. So there's really no target. At that point, I'm looking for sell signals in the price action. Let me see here. What else? When will Ripple reverse? I don't know. Ripple's kind of been not happening here for a while. Let's look at the Ripple chart. And I'm not in Ripple, just to clarify. But, until this trend reverses, guys, there's really nothing to do. If you've been holding Ripple the whole way down, I don't know what to say, because at this point, you've kind of taken the most of the move. But there's no signals here yet that are showing me that this is done going down. It's done bottoming. It's certainly been underperforming Bitcoin and most of the other altcoins. And so who knows? I'm not doing anything with Ripple at the time. Okay, let's see here. What do I think about Metal and Civic? Civic. I like Civic right now. Actually picked up some Civic earlier. Let's see here. What's it doing? What's Civic doing these days? Look at that. Still going. So here's the thing with Civic. Oh, my God. So it had this big move. And everyone thinks, oh, Civic up 80, 90%. I missed the boat. Maybe. So what I tend to do is I look at the very close action here on these when they do that. Had this big move, and this is exactly what I was playing it today, guys. So I saw Civic, and I'm not going to buy on this move here, right? But once it started to flag out like this, and it started to ascend, and the moving averages caught up, I was on red alert, and I thought this guy's going to go, and this was my signal right here, this little bar. And when I saw that happening, I jumped on, and so there it is. Nice little move. Longer term, I don't know. It's got a lot of good potential. Admittedly, this is probably more of a swing trade for me right now. So Civic, pretty strong after this little pop on the flag here. Would I buy it here now? No, I'm not going to touch it here at this point, but I mean, I'm already holding it. So maybe you guys wait for a pullback on Civic. This one's small cap. It's just getting started, so probably has a longer ways to go on the upside, in my opinion, but it's just going to kind of ebb and flow. So there's Civic. How do I phase out of trades? I think I covered that. So very often what I'll do, if it's not a core holding, if it's just a trade, I tend to do 2 buys and 2 sells. Unless it's climactic and I just say I'm done, I'll sell it all. But what I'll do is a lot of times when I see these kind of setups, if I think it's going to go, like see how the volume just really lined up right here and it starts to pop, I'll put in my first trade here preemptively before the pop. And so what I'll do is I'll buy a little position there with a pretty tight stop. And then when I see the signal, I'll buy the rest of my trade at that point. So I tend to do 2. And then on the way out, it just depends. Sometimes you phase, you kind of scale out. Maybe I'll sell half here and then see where it goes, or wait for a signal if it starts to pull in, get out of it there. Sometimes I'll do trailing stops and just kind of let these go, and then they stop me out when they pull back on their own. So good question. Oh, let me see here. What's a high risk reward coin you're looking at now and why? Well, Civic was one a few hours ago, and that's why. What else am I in right now? So I'm looking at 10x. I'm looking at, I've been on Iota for a little bit. Let's look at Omise Go. Omise Go has been running pretty good. So finally pulling in, but had a very nice run. So we basically had 2 bases here on Omise Go. So we had this nice big base, had the big run, and then just over the last couple of days, set up a little bit of an ascending wedge with a kind of a cup and handle. And some of you guys are asking me about that cup and handle, and this was a very nice cup and handle, by the way, because you don't want them to be more than 30% deep. So you see this one, this is about 33%, so 30, 35%. You can give maybe 40%. And then you don't want the handle to be more than 15% or half the cup. And this one came down to 14. So very nice setup. So yeah, this one was kind of on the watch list, and we saw it pop last night. And sure enough, had a big run, pulling in here a little bit. So if you like Omise Go, maybe take a look at it here on this this longer 30 EMA moving average, see if it can get some support there. Below that, you'll get some pretty solid support at the top of the old base here. So right around these levels, which might correlate with this longer moving average. And then, you see the RSI kind of coming in a little bit, which is good because you don't want them to stay elevated. They need this kind of pullback to kind of reset some of that exhaustion. Let's see what else. Let me go through the questions here. Day trading, taxes. Oh man, that's a long question, and I'm not gonna get into taxes right now. Let me just put it this way: when it comes to taxes, that's an afterthought. I will never not sell anything because I'm scared of paying taxes. I'd rather bank 300% than pay taxes on 50% gain, if that makes any sense. So you just got to keep track of it if you're learning into day trading, and it just depends on your jurisdiction. But to me, that's just an afterthought, right? If you're an institutional investor and you got millions, then yeah, you got to pay attention to that. But I just pay attention to the price action. Oh, let's see here. What are my long-term holds? Well, Bitcoin's in my portfolio. That's a long-term hold. NEO right now, I have a core holding, but I'm trading around it as it ebbs and flows. I still have a little bit of Litecoin, and I've got some NEM. I think NEM's good right now. That's it. And long-term, the term long-term is a little subjective in crypto space, right? Because long-term could be a few months, but it's all subject to change, right? I mean, I think some of these will be much higher at the end of the year or next year, but if we see another June, July type of action, I'm going to readjust my portfolio. It's as simple as that, right? So yeah, I have some long-term holds, but at the end of the day, I'm going to respond to the market action. Waves. Let's see waves. Oh, so selling off a little bit here. Let's see. Zoom out a little bit. That's the 1 hour chart. So if we go to the daily, the thing that I was looking at on waves is this little double bottom right that it had. Let me use the draw tool here. So I had this nice double bottom pattern that it put in with the neckline being right around here. And you can see right where it broke out, right? Nice big green bar. Would have liked to see a little more volume, but not bad, right? Above average volume for sure. Pulls back right to the breakout, the neckline, and now it's just kind of consolidating that. So not bad on waves. Would like to see it a little bit stronger. It looks like it's having a little trouble getting above this prior resistance right there. So if we can get above that level, which it's not exact, but if you can get above, let's just call it, 180,000 Satoshi. You could probably see waves test the old highs here. So that's the area I'd be watching on waves. One thing to note, some of you guys have been asking about my RSIs. So this is just a little trade, a little tip that I use. So traditionally, the RSI levels are set to 70 and 30, meaning when it's 70 or above, it's considered quote unquote overbought. And I'm not too fond of that term. And then when it's 30, you're oversold, right? And that just tends to be where things bottom and peak. But and I do pay attention to overbought, and those when I'm seeing something at 80 and 90%, on these, I definitely pay attention. But the thing is, something can be quote unquote overbought for a long time, and you can see it here, right? We went up to 79.80, and from that point, I mean, we maintained that high RSI level, but look at how much it ran after that. So you don't necessarily need to get out when something is that high. But going back to my levels, what I do is I watch the 60 and the 40, because when something's in bull mode and it pulls back, the RSI tends to hold that 40 zone and doesn't tend to get lower. But when something is weak, it has a hard time getting over 60. And so you can see here, it's kind of struggling to get over 60 a little bit. So when it starts to pop above that, that's further confirmation that, we're kind of entering a stronger period. So I look at RSI a couple of ways. I do divergences. So here's a good divergence on this particular chart. So you can see this low was higher than this low. But if you look at the RSI here was a little bit lower than this way. So when you see that divergence, especially on a pattern like a double bottom, that's a good sign that that second low was the low. And so at that point, you're paying attention. Okay, so let me see what else. Thoughts on TradingView versus Coinigy. You know, the chart action and the way you use it is basically the same. I like Coinigy because it's crypto focused, and you get all the exchanges, and just it's not bad. I mean, it's a paid premium product, so there's that downside. TradingView is free. TradingView is nice because there's that little social aspect of it, so you can see other people's charts and some of their markups. So I use both, but I use Coinigy a lot more. Any thoughts on Ubic? So we already talked Omise Go. Let's look at Ubic here. So Ubic. So this is the daily. I'm not doing anything with this right here. So here's what I'm looking at on Ubic when you see this chart. First thing that should stand out is the longer term 50 moving average is rolling over. Try to rally, and it failed right there, right at that 50. And so the shorter term moving averages are still below on the daily chart. And if you look at the general trend, it's pretty fair to say that the general trend is down. So until that reverses, probably nothing to do on Ubic. And if anything, it's kind of setting up a little descending triangle pattern here. So if you're in Ubic, I'd be keeping a real close eye on this support level, because if this level breaks, you're going to have a sharp leg to the downside. So those are my thoughts on Ubic. Probably not a whole lot to do. And again, look at the RSI. It's just can't even get above 55, right? It's a little bit weak here. All right. 10X. 10X for a couple of reasons. I think fundamentally the project may have some potential. And the chart is looking pretty nice here on the setups. So it's an ICO. Why do I like it? I just like some of the chart pattern action here. So these are younger ones. These are volatile, no doubts. But you see this big setup here, right? A little bit of a base. Had this nice run. Set up a little bit of a pullback here. And so what I was doing is I was watching this level here, right? And that's when I was kind of watching it to see if it could break above. It did. It's pulling in a little bit. So what I expect is I'd like to see it hold this 10 EMA on this chart. And that may be a good secondary entry point. Most likely it will hold because of this prior resistance, which is now hopefully support. So between here and this moving average should be what I'd be watching. And if it gets below that, probably get out of the way and see where it bottoms out at. So that's the level that I'm watching on 10X. And so I'm holding for now. Does Fibonacci sequence only apply to 1 month or above charts? No, not at all. So Fibonacci applies to basically any time frame, right? So a lot of the short-term traders, they like to use Fibonacci because it works really well, especially when you're looking at the hourlies, right? You're looking at some of these pullbacks. And so they work very well across all time frames. And in fact, I would say Fibonacci probably works better on the shorter time frames than the longer time frames. How many currencies do you study daily? Good question. So there are tons of them. And what I like to do generally is I like to keep my watch list daily short, right? So I'll keep it to like maybe 10 that I'm watching intimately, right? And right now that list is the big three: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and then I'm watching NEM, I'm watching NEO, I'm watching Stratus, Waves, and then some of the other ones I'm holding. So Iota, 10X, Omise Go. And then some of the other ones, I'll take a broader scan periodically, and I'll kind of look through the broader market and see what else is doing what. But as far as like intimately watching stuff, I try to keep the list low, because if you can get familiar with a handful, and really there's only a handful of really strong leaders at any one time. Those are the ones you just want to watch. I mean, the better ones. Not to say any of the other ones aren't good. And you got to pay attention. If you see something poking its head up and it's up 50, 60%, maybe it should go on the watch list. But I try to keep it small so that I can stay focused. Siacoin. I haven't looked at Siacoin for a while. Let's take a look at Siacoin. Yikes. So yeah, still, you know, I had high hopes for Siacoin. I was thinking it would bottom out around these lower. Let me find this here. Sorry about that. I really thought it was going to hold these prior lows here because it was putting in some really good lows, which also correlated with prior bases. And once it broke that, it's just kind of still heading south. So nothing to do yet. And, you know, it's way extreme oversold, so it could definitely bounce here. I mean, it's hitting the lows, but at this point, it's not strong, so I'm not going to touch it. I mean, and personally, I'm not going to buy something that's kind of this. You know, maybe a good value play for longer term if you believe in the project. The thing with a lot of these, though, is the idea is great and the project's good, but there's a lot of competition, right? There's other tokens coming out that are trying to do what they're doing. And we're just so young in this space. The way I treat it is kind of like startups, right? They may be good, but you don't know if they're going to survive over the long term. You don't know which ones are going to win at the end. And so that's just, you just got to take it day by day on some of these charts. And right now, this one, not a whole lot to do. Let's see here. Quark. All right. All right. See a lot of comments on Quark. We'll look at Quark. All right. So I had this nice run here. Let me zoom out on the daily. I know it's a younger chart here, but yeah, you know, just some of these low volume names, I just can't do anything with them until they start being a little more liquid. And because somebody buys something, it does this, and then somebody sells it and it just kind of pops down. So nothing for me to do on this one yet. Oh, let me see. Most time efficient way to do fundamental analysis. Good question. When you're buying some of these tokens and you want to know what the heck are they, what do they do? I actually did a little video on that, so you can go check that out. But the way I do it is I generally start on YouTube. I'll cycle through a few channels that I like, see what they have to say, because there's a lot of folks out there that do good what is videos, and they'll tell you a little bit about the project. And then I'll go to the website, I'll check it out, I'll see what they have to say there. If they don't offer a lot of information, they don't tell you who the founders are or anything like that, that's usually a red flag for me. But that's usually what I'll do. And then I'll look at other things like token supply. I'll use coinmarketcap.com to do some of that, see what exchanges it's trading on. So that's a couple of tools I use. Okay, let's see here. Stratus. I think we looked at Stratus. I'll look at it one more time. So Stratus. So Stratus, basically the thing you do on Stratus is watch this trend line that it's trying to put in here and watch this area it's trying to break out of, which it tried to do today. And that's it. It's tightening up here. It's actually looking pretty good, but it tried to pop out today. A lot of selling came in at that point. RSI is not really bullish yet. So keep an eye on it. If it starts to break these moving averages to the downside again, probably not a good sign. I wouldn't let it get too far below this trend line here if you're already holding it. And at this point, that's about another 10-12% to the downside. So it's probably the most I'd give it. If it can get above that, I mean, it'll look pretty good because it's kind of a nice little base. Looks some pretty decent accumulation happening here. So if we can get above that, I'd be looking at these next two resistance levels. So you're talking maybe, you know, a 30 to 40% move to the upside if we can see it pop. What channels do I like? Oh man, if I start naming off channels, some of you guys will get mad at me because I don't mention your channel. There's a lot of good ones out there. I like Box Mining. He does a lot of good what is type of videos, and he's had a lot of good interviews lately. There's a lot of good ones out there, guys. I'll leave it at that because I inevitably I'm going to start forgetting people, and you guys are going to hate me for it. So. Let's see here. Do I think things like Control Finance and BitConnect are scams? Oh, man, that's a common question. So here's a short answer. I don't use them. I don't like them. I think scam is too strong of a word. I think there's a lot of counterparty risk. But the main reason I don't do them is, I mean, it's just a different strategy, right? You're generating referrals and links and some of that stuff. But at the end of the day, I like to control my capital. And so I'm not going to loan it out, or I'm not going to invest and hope that somebody gives me some percent of return. I get the lure, right? The passiveness, the passive income. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to stay away. I'm just going to maintain my own trades and do my own moves on that end. So I know a lot of you guys are into that, and I'm not saying stay away. It's just not for me. Ethereum, how can we do this and not talk Ether? Let's talk Ether. So let's go to Ethereum. I'll look at both charts here. So let's do the dollar chart first. So see this big red bar here? It looked like that was some selling showing up right at this old resistance point here. So that's the little bit of a pause, but it's still strong. I mean, it's had a nice move up the bottom. This low was a very, very solid low. And once it broke out above this kind of this 240 area that it was struggling to get above, had a nice move up on the daily charts. Looks like the 10 EMA is just starting to catch up a little bit. RSI is moving up. If we zoom in a little bit, look at the 4-hour chart. Can't complain. I mean, try to sell off a little bit. Some decent volume came in. So I'd be looking maybe this moving average here holds. If it gets above this most recent high, probably see another leg up on Ethereum. So not bad. I'm liking Ethereum here. It's looking good. I think it's just going to keep climbing its way up slowly. I mean, there's going to be ebbs and flows. We'll have to see. But not bad. It's kind of just tracking the Bitcoin at this point. If you look at the Ethereum BTC chart, it's had some small outperforms and pulling in a little bit. So looking good. We might as well look at Bitcoin. What's Bitcoin doing? So Bitcoin digesting that move very nicely. Looks like these moving averages are catching up. You're going to see 3,500 Bitcoin here real soon. So looking good. I mean, barring any big breaks here, but it's just strong. Just had that nice pop moving, just moving up nicely. So Bitcoin's looking good. And that's really the leader right now. As long as things move okay with Bitcoin, the altcoins are just going to keep rocking. When to buy, market versus limit. Good question. So what I like to do is I use limits, but I will adjust the pricing on the limit to basically make it a market order without leaving it open-ended, right? So meaning, if I was going to do a market order on Bitcoin, let's say the price was 3404, Bitcoin's pretty liquid, but some of these other ones are not. And if there's a sell order for like 35.50, you might get filled at that high price, right? So I don't do that. So if I really want to buy, I'll put a limit order, but I'll put it at a price above the ask. So if I really want in on something, I'll just get it, because I've learned the hard way to put a limit order and then I'll wait and wait and wait. And it's just like you miss it by a penny sometimes. And so if you want something, just go get it, but put a limit order in with some sort of ceiling. So in this case, in this example, if I wanted this, I might put a limit order at 3406 or something, and then just go from there. And same on the stops. You don't want to be that guy that gets stopped out on Ethereum at 10 cents. Oh, all right. Let's see here. How are we doing on time? We're pretty much running out, so I'm going to try to cycle through a couple more of these. Well, Litecoin, stop being autistic. Good grief. Litecoin, you're killing me. I know. It's just, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't look bad, but, when you're seeing everything else just so strong, you're kind of wondering what the heck. It'll probably pop now that we've all said that. So let me look through a couple more of these questions, see if there's anything else I'm missing here. I'm looking through both comments, so bear with me, folks. We all need a Neo pullback. Yes, we do. You're getting it. Don't worry. I like to say that there's always a pullback and there's always a pause. Nothing goes straight up. Thank you. Course was awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've thought about doing more advanced ones. So you guys let me know what you guys want to focus on. I've run a couple of different scenarios, maybe just doing webinars, advanced trading webinars, or maybe doing advanced courses on specific things like kind of mini courses like on Fibonacci or maybe some more advanced candlestick chart reading. So I'm not sure yet. I certainly would like to do more. So I'm thinking about those. Let me see here. Sorry, guys, I'm looking through some of these questions. So a question on EMA, so the moving averages. Depending on the time scale, the 10 and the 30s get closer or further apart. So let's say both are apart in the bars above the 30 on the 2 hour, but if we switch to the 30, it's close to the 10. Yes, absolutely. So what you're asking here is, so here's a good example. So you see on the 4 hour chart, you see the 10 EMA kind of staying tight. If we go to the daily, essentially that 30 EMA translates into a shorter time period, and it kind of becomes a 10 EMA on the daily chart. So yeah, the shorter term moving average kind of goes away on the longer time frames, and then you see the longer moving average go away. So when you see these longer spreads right here, so when you see the 50 down here and the 30 over here, these kind of lose relevance on the longer term chart until they really catch up and it bases out. So at that point, you're focused only on the shorter term. But when you zoom in and you're looking at a 4 hour, you're looking at this one, and these make sense. And then certainly on the 1 hours, the 1 hours, the 10 EMA doesn't really play a factor unless it's just going parabolic. So yeah, it just adjusts depending on the time frame you're looking at. So good question. Oh, let me see here. Stellar Lumens. Not a whole lot with Stellar. We covered Ripple already. I think Lumens are tracking. Let me see. It looks like it wants the bottom here. It's kind of bouncing here. Not too bad. If I go to the daily chart, the moving averages are all inverted still, so it's kind of negative, right? The short term's below, the next one is below the next longer one. So not a strong looking chart, still bearish in my opinion. Oh, let me see here. Do I ever buy at rock bottom? No, I just don't. I mean, a lot of people like, so here's my philosophy on buying at the bottoms, right? When you're trading and investing, try not to have a consumer mentality and always try to get the best price and the absolute best deal. What you want to focus on is not so much the best price, but the best time, right? And so I'm okay with paying more, 50, 60% more, if something pops and sets up and it looks like it's going to start running, because now it's the best time to be in it and you're maximizing the potential of your capital working. I'm not going to buy something just because it's really cheap and low, because it could be cheaper later, or it could just sit there flat for a long time and my money would be better off in something that's strong and moving up. So that's my philosophy. Buy at the best time, not the best price. So I don't bottom pick or buy rock bottom stuff. Digibytes, let's take a look at Digibytes. Not a fan right now, I don't believe. But yeah, still bearish too, right? Look at the moving averages on the dailies. 10 is below the 30, is below the 50. I mean, nothing to do. It looked like it was trying right here. Try that little pop. But just weak. Nothing to do right here. I mean, if you're in it, don't know what to say. If you're in it now at this point, it's trying to put in a pretty good low. So I'd not let it get too much below these current levels that it's putting in right around here. So, but I'm not doing anything with this one right now. All right. Last but not least, Golem. Okay, maybe not last, but let's take a look at Golem. You guys don't mind, I'll go over a little bit. Golem. Yeah, still struggling too. That's the daily chart of Golem. So I mean, just hasn't recovered. You know, it's interesting too, because, and I remember I mentioned this, right, when the market was crashing and things were going down, and I said, guys, there will be a bottom. Be patient and wait. And I remember saying, and most likely on the next leg up, there's going to be new names you probably never heard of, things that form, things that come out of the good work. And look at what's happened. I mean, Golem, Siacoin, Digibyte, right? They're not really doing much right now. And you're getting all these names that weren't on the radar in May and June, right? Neo and Omise Go and some of these other ones, right? They're just, it's just cycling through, and things are just kind of a new crop of leaders. All right. So yeah, smaller bites on candles, fibs, EMA. So thank you for the feedback. I might have to do some of that stuff, and maybe some mini courses on some of that. How much under the stop do you set on the sell order? So on the sell order, that's a good question. Just depends. I gave it a couple of percent, right? Because if something is moving fast and it cracks to the downside, you don't want your limit price to be too close to your stop point, because you might not get filled, right? There might be people willing to sell at a lower price. So what you want to do is you want to set your stop. So in the case here, like, let's say this price was my stop. So what's that? 9396. And if I set that as my stop, I would put a limit order, a sell limit order for like 9330 or something, right? So something below it. So in case it crosses, that triggers, hey, place my order, and then you still give it a little bit of wiggle room in case the market's moving fast and you get like one of these big red bars. Because if you keep it too tight, you're not going to get filled. And again, it depends on the liquidity, right? Something like Bitcoin and Ethereum that just trade massive volume probably won't have an issue. Something that trades a little less volume, maybe $1 million a day, you got to give it more room. All right. Lisk. All right, let's take a look at Lisk. Lisk. You know, I was liking Lisk for a while. I'm not sure what happened here. I was really liking it up here when it was setting up this, looked like it was about to break out up here. Then the market kind of just took a hit. Let me go to the dailies on Lisk. So here's Lisk on the daily chart. It was looking really good right here, and then just kind of broke, and so far still heading down. And I know I sound like a broken record here, but you know, when you're looking at something, zoom out, take a look at the big chart, and look at the daily, right? The 10 EMA is above the prices. It's bouncing into these 30 EMA moving averages and just can't get above. When you see it reverse this, that's maybe a signal, and especially when the 50 is below the shorter term, if it gets above. Now, you don't have to wait till it gets that far, but you want it to set up here, right? So let's say Lisk starts to put in the bottom here, you know, and it starts to bounce and put a floor here. What I would personally be doing is I would just wait until it confirms and breaks above this recent resistance, right? You don't necessarily need to buy it at the low. And I know that's hard to hard to want to do sometimes, because you see that you're going, that's 30% above. But it's just kind of proven itself to be in this trading channel right now. And until it proves itself to me, I'm probably not going to do anything with it. So because if it breaks above this, you might have a pretty decent run, right? So you just want to be on the ones that are moving, the ones that are a little bit stronger. So if you do like Lisk, if you like the project, and I know there's news coming out, and if you like that, then it's okay, right? Pick some up here, but you mean this is your level, right? And certainly no more below these recent lows down here. So that's how I'd be playing those if you wanted to buy them. Iota, haven't looked at Iota. What? Maybe I did for a little bit, but more explanatory. So let's take a look at Iota. I like Iota, by the way. So you can see all my lines here from when I was buying it. So Iota is just kind of very nice. Just, I mean, strong, moving up. You know, it's a little extended off the 10 EMA on the dailies, but if we go to the 4-hour charts, I mean, look at just kind of ebbing, flowing, had a nice little base here, setting up, popping. So not bad at all. I'm holding mine. I'm going to keep holding until it shows me otherwise. But at this point, I'm liking it. And again, if you zoom out here, we're kind of nearing some resistance. So I'm keeping a close eye on it because it's, see where it's at, kind of hitting this old high. And that's on the BTC chart. I know on the dollar chart's not that way, but on the BTC, we're kind of hitting this old high. So that's what I'm watching. And then if you look at the Iota on the USD, right here, see, we're basically near these old highs. And so that's what I'm looking at, because this is very often where they pause, but if it breaks above, you might see a nice move up. So Iota's looking good. If we can get above 60, 65-ish, probably have another good leg up. The setup was right here. You know, this was the first base. So at this point, once you have a breakout, you're just kind of looking for some pullback. So this would have been a secondary entry. Right now, it's kind of pausing. So keep an eye on it. If it breaks above this most recent highs, that might be another run on Iota. All right. You guys with me? You guys mind if I keep going a little bit more? I just like looking at charts. Let me see here. Do I tend to sell before Friday since it's usually a down day? No, I don't. I know it is. It's usually a down day, and it just depends. You know, I keep all of that stuff in mind. I try to keep some of the news in mind, but at the end of the day, nothing is going to trump price action. So if I'm not getting sell signals, I'm not going to anticipate a sell day. I'm just going to watch and go. And if you think it's a sell day, maybe tighten up your stops, or, you know, be on alert, watch the charts. I get that, but nothing's just going to trump the price action for me. At the end of the day, price and volume action is number one. And then number two is indicators, moving averages and stuff like that, and then RSI and FIPS, because those are generally lagging a little bit, right? They're good for confirmation, but if you learn to read the price and volume action, that's a huge part of it. Ooh, let's see here. What are my top buys right now in order? Ooh, I don't know if I can tell you in order. Well, I told you guys I picked up some Civic earlier. I picked up some 10X. Those are probably shorter term trades. My top buy is probably NEO on a pullback. I want more. So let's see. Yeah, so this is all right. It's holding so far. So yeah, I mean, let's go to CoinMarketCap. So you look at, and it's hard for me to recommend top buys because it depends on where you're at, right? If this is your very first purchase and you're just kind of looking to get started, don't get some of the high flyers or high risk ones, or at least not 100% of your portfolio, right? It's good to have a little Bitcoin and some Ethereum. NEM, I'm liking NEM. I'm waiting for it to pop. We'll look at the chart right now. Litecoin, you know, Litecoin should have held that 47 mark. It's not doing it, so looking weak. NEO, I have high hopes for NEO long term, so that's probably a good one. Iota, we already talked. Iota's looking good. Dash ain't bad, just not at the top of my list right now. Qdom, I know there's a lot of debate around this one. You know what's funny? I did a whole fundamental analysis research on Qdom. I was stuck on an airplane and sat in the tarmac for like an hour, and this was mid-July when the market was bottoming and Qdom hit my radar. And admittedly, I did nothing with it. I looked at it and I thought, wow, this looks pretty good. Kind of mobile platform. Looks like it could be good. And then I didn't do anything with it. But I'm not complaining. You can't get them all. Yeah, so those are some of my top ones. Omise Go. I mean, it's a little extended here, but looks good. So I hope that helps. I mean, there's a lot of good ones here, you know. And that's the thing. You can't get them all. And over trading is going to be your worst enemy. If you buy something and it runs up 30% and you're like, oh, I'm missing it, I'm going to buy it, and then decides to base out, and then you don't do anything with it, and then all of a sudden you see another one pop in and you jump out of that one, oh, I'm going to go buy that one, and then that one, you know, just sometimes you got to be patient or buy a few of them and just kind of let them sit. You know, it's easy to want to jump out when you see something moving up 30, 40, 50%. And I understand that, but you got to let them sit. Economy, you know, I like the idea of Economy. I really do. That's kind of a cool platform. What's the ticker for Economy here? ICN. Oh, is it? Yeah. Trade on Kraken. Thinking I got the right symbol, guys. If I don't, let me know. Let me just look. Let me just look. Where's it at? Yeah, ICN. There's two ICNs. What is that? I like the platform. I really like the idea. I think it might be a good potential. I mean, just the whole portfolio management concept of it. The chart right now is, you know, it's just not strong, not one of the stronger ones. It looks like, you know, so there's a really solid support level right here. I'd be watching that. We're getting pretty close to it right now. So maybe it bottoms out here. Keep an eye on it. Not a whole lot here yet, but hey, it might be bottoming out, and this support level kind of correlates with back here a little bit. So that could be a good low for this one, but nothing for me to do with this one yet. What's my best day of profits? You know, I don't know. I don't know. I try not to get too caught up on that, because then it throws me off my game. I get too cocky and then I make a bad trade. But you know, right now just the market's hot. I mean, easily some of my top ones recently have been, you know, 70%, 100% a day, easily. Just you catch the right move at the right time, and if you bank it, it's not bad. Oh, what will pay correct to? I would look at the old recent high here and then the 30 EMA. So I think it's right there now. Okay, guys. I'm thinking that's about it. What's your limit on losses? I do two ways. I like percents sometimes, but I'd rather put a limit on a trend line or a moving average or a recent support level if it's not like way too far down, right? If it's 20 or 30% below, then that won't work. But let's take a look at NEO. So, man, NEO, just strong. So let's say I pick some up here at the, oops. Let's say I pick some up here on this dip. And you wanted to say, okay, what's a good good loss or stop loss here? So let's say you're buying it here and you don't know if it's going to rally or not. And you're thinking this is the low, but it's maybe not. So first level to look at is, can we get above this big red bar? And let's say we do, and you buy some right here. The next level to look at is this resistance. Can we get above this level? So if I bought some around here, my ultimate stop would be below this level, right? And that's, you know, that's a pretty good, decent 15 to 20%. So if you're comfortable with that, that's how you do it. Otherwise, you give it the moving average, and that's a much tighter stop, but you know, you have risk of being shaken out. So you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a candle wick right here. And so at that point, you just use a percent. And so if you buy it here, maybe give it, I don't usually give more than 10%, but you know, 10% would have put you pretty good right around here. And so that's about to stop. I think if you go too tight, I mean, these are just so volatile that, you know, in the stock market, a 5 and a 7% move is a good stop. Here, a 10% move is kind of nothing, right? You'll get these big moves. I mean, look at this candle from top to bottom is 15% in 4 hours. So Not easy. Definitely moves fast. So at that point, you can look at the hourlies. This is when the shorter term charts come in handy, because then you're buying it here, and then you can be a little more strategic on which candle you're going to put your stop below. Maybe it's this one, or maybe it's this one, right? And so that's how I look at those. All right. One last look at the questions, and I think we're going to wrap it up here. All right. Yeah, Neo. Gosh, I know it could be setting up for another launch. Just hard to say, guys. This market's just so hot right now. Yeah, if you're not a Neo, I don't know what to say right now. The shorter term chart's going to be your best friend just because it's had such a big run. So on the 1 hour chart, watch this 10 EMA. Right now it's holding it really good. The most I'd give it is the 30. If it gets below that, it might be a base out or a correction here. I say correction mildly. I'm not saying Neo's going to crash, but that's what I'm looking at. So your shorter term charts are your friend right now, and it's kind of nice. This RSI's come in a little bit, so that might be it. Could have another move up here, but just super strong. Loving Neo right now, guys. What's been my best coin ever? Ethereum, hands down. But I got lucky on that one, I think, and I traded it very well. Initially picked that up around 12 bucks, and then it dipped on me, and I bought some more around $8, and then ran it up, and then this last run up, pretty much traded it pretty good on the way up. I was kicking myself on Ethereum because I thought I was being smart, and I sold a bunch of Ethereum, not a bunch, but probably a third of my holdings at about 170 bucks. And I just said, I'm going to cash out, and then it ran up to 200. And I never got that portion back in, but started selling a lot of it in the 300s. And then when I started correcting on the way down. So probably my best one ever. Okay, guys, that's going to be it. Another session tomorrow, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you guys for joining. Talk to you later.